Welcome to the Queen City Music Podcast, the podcast devoted to the local music scene in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, here's your host, Matthew Ablan.
Hello, and welcome to episode 53 of the Queen City Music Podcast. This episode of the Queen City Music Podcast is sponsored by Middle C Jazz, Charlotte's premier jazz club located at 300 South Brevard Street in Uptown Charlotte. Stop in for Thursday night jazz jams, gospel Sundays every third Sunday of the month, or bi-weekly Wednesdays for Remember Wednesdays. But if you prefer, stay in for the evening and watch their Saturday night live stream, where you'll have access to the best performances Middle C Jazz has to offer. And if you want the VIP treatment, get a Baby Grand membership, where life takes you to a higher note. Tickets are now available for An Evening with Patrick Lamb on February 5th. Noel and Maria present Love Letters from Middle C on February 12th and 13th. And then Cy Smith is performing with the Rhythm for You Band on February 24th through the 26th. And I'd like to welcome our newest sponsor, Midwood Guitar Studio, Charlotte, North Carolina's own boutique guitar shop located in Plaza Midwood. Midwood Guitar Studio not only has the finest selection of boutique guitars, but also familiar names like Fender, Martin, Taylor, Two Rock, and many others. Whether it's a guitar, bass, amp, effects pedal, or a much-needed accessory, the knowledgeable and friendly staff at Midwood Guitar Studio will help guide you in the right direction for your next purchase. Visit their website at midwoodguitarstudio.com or stop in to see their unique shop at 1517 Central Avenue, Charlotte, North Carolina. I hope everyone enjoyed our recent snowfall, but truthfully, I'm ready for warmer weather. Oh, and just a reminder, if you haven't had a chance to check out my recent release, You and Me, it's currently on all streaming platforms, and it features some amazing local Charlotte musicians. If you'd like to know more about me and all the things that I'm up to, head over to my website at matthewablan.com, and there's always a link in the show notes to make it easy for you. This month on episode 53 of the QCMP, I'm speaking with bassist Ron Brendle, whose accolades include being named Best Bass Player by Charlotte Magazine and Jazz Artist of the Year by Creative Loafing. Ron is a player who's equally at home performing on stage as he is recording in the studio. Having recorded on over 100 albums, whether his own or with other artists, Ron is truly a gem in our Charlotte music scene. Ron Brendle, welcome to the Queen City Music Podcast. It's great to have you, man.
It's a pleasure to be here. I've enjoyed your shows and been looking forward to it.
Thanks, man. Yeah, we got snowed out the other day, if you're just listening, and Ron was supposed to come over on Sunday, and we had the big snowstorm happen, so we were recording here during the week. So, all right, Ron, let's get started, man. Are you originally from the Charlotte area?
I was born in Charlotte, but I grew up in Statesville, so I guess that's sort of a suburb of Charlotte.
Yeah.
Most of my life until I went to college at Appalachian State, and then I came to Charlotte, and then I've spent some time in Hempstead, Long Island.
Okay, yeah, my hometown or homeland,
yes,
as it were.
Yeah,
that's awesome, man. So, what's your music background, Ron? So, you're a bass player in town, primarily in jazz. What's your background? How did you get involved with playing bass?
Well, I started on guitar when I was about 12, and I was a big Beatles fan, and I didn't learn to read music until much later, but I learned to read guitar symbols from a Beatles songbook that I had.
Like chord charts and stuff?
Yeah, just chord charts.
Or chord diagrams.
Yeah, you'd see like C7, and I was like, oh, what does that mean? And I would listen to the record, and it's like, okay, that's what a seventh chord sounds like, or a minor chord. Okay, that's what that means. So I'm pretty much self-taught. I started taking some piano lessons when I was about a senior in high school. When I graduated from high school, Mitchell College in Statesville joined the community college system. So I was able to live at home and go get my first 2 years of college for about $40 a quarter, literally. And they had a great music department, and I learned, to more about music, reading and sight singing, dictation, and that type of thing.
Okay.
And I met some good musicians, and then when I graduated from there, I went to Appalachian State, and that's kind of where I discovered jazz. I was kind of trying to play cello, and I couldn't. I couldn't cut it in.
You tell me a little bit before we started recording.
No, I couldn't. I couldn't cut cello. I was too new at it. I'd only been playing for a couple of years, and I decided to ditch cello and audition for the jazz big band on guitar. So I got to do that, and I learned mostly just from hanging out with some of the jazz guys there. Go hanging out and listening to records, listening to things I'd never heard.
Yeah.
I sort of came into jazz from the fusion door. I'd already been listening to like John McLaughlin and Mahavishnu Orchestra and Larry Coryell and some guys that were doing fusion because I used to get Guitar Player magazine back years ago, and I remember reading these guys' names like, wow, who is Larry Coryell? And I was also in Record Club of America, which I don't know if you would remember.
I had Columbia House.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they were the big ones. You'd buy. They had a catalog they'd send you, and you'd order records, and they mail them to you. Yeah. Perfect for somebody who lived out in the middle of nowhere like I did.
And it was great for folks who wanted to get a collection going, because you'd send it, you'd get like 13 tapes for like, I don't know, $10 as the initial thing, and then you'd send up 5 accounts so that you could get like tons of music.
Yes, yeah. It was a great thing to get those in the mail, But I grew up in a place outside of Statesville in Cool Springs, there really wasn't much of a cultural scene. I guess the big music around that area was bluegrass and country, which I liked,
Well, how did you you were talking about playing at ASU and applying to or trying out for the jazz band as a guitar player, but you didn't start out as a bass player. How did you get into bass playing or become a bassist?
Gosh, I was 26 when I started playing. I remember the day that I decided I wanted to do it, and my good friend Frank Kimbrough, he bought this record by Hampton Hawes. He was a piano player, jazz piano player named Hampton Hawes, and Charlie Hayden on bass. And it was just a duo called As Long As There's Music. And we put that record on. And when I heard the first note that Charlie Hayden played, it was just mesmerizing. I just couldn't move until the side was over. And I decided, like, I've got to play bass. I'd listened to a lot of jazz, of course, and a lot of other music with pyrotechnical bass players who played a lot of notes and everything. And this impressed me more, just that sound that he was getting, and that's what got me. It hooked me. I got the bass bug. So you went from being
a guitar player, and then all of a sudden you heard a certain bass player, Charlie Hayden, and you were like, man, that's it. That's what I want to do.
That's exactly right.
Interesting.
Yeah. That didn't happen immediately. At the time, I was working at John Sipes Violin Company repairing instruments, and I was doing a lot of work on basses. I would plane the fingerboards and put bridges in, and John didn't like to work on the basses and cellos, so I got to do that, and I would string them up and get them ready and pluck on them, to make sure they were set up right. And I was thinking, I probably could play one of these if I had one, and I wound up getting a cheap one. And
upright bass?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I started on upright, and then I went back to electric just maybe, 10 years or so ago. Mm-hmm. But that was it was all over for me. Once I got a bass, that's all I wanted to do.
So I've got 2 questions for you, in a long line of them. You started on upright bass and then got into electric bass. Do you have a preference on which you prefer to play today?
At one time I would have told you upright.
Yeah.
But now I don't. I love them both.
Yeah.
Certain music is better with one or the other. I used to be an upright kind of purist, an upright snob. Even it's like, upright sounds better on everything. You can funk, rock, folk, R&B, everything's better with upright. But I don't feel that way at all now. I love electric. I spend most of my time, actually, when I practice, I probably spend most of my time practicing on electric.
What's your instrument of choice when you're playing electric? Do you play a jazz bass? Is it a boutique instrument that you're playing on?
No, I like Fender Jazz, and
Fender Jazz.
I have a nice old early 70s P bass. I like that. It's got a lot of character. I've got a couple of jazz basses, and I have flat wound strings on one and round wound strings on one.
So when you're playing electric, coming from an upright background, do you prefer playing a fretless electric, or do you like a fretted electric, or it doesn't matter?
For funk and rock and things, I mean, I like fretted better.
Okay.
I've got a couple of fretless basses. As a matter of fact, I just got one. I've got a Marcustico bass I ordered back in March from this maker in Spain, and when you hear it, you think it's upright.
Wow.
I mean, it's not like, yeah, it sort of sounds like an upright. No, you hear it. If you're not looking, you think it's an upright.
Yeah.
And it's fretless, and it has lines on it. First bass I ever had with a lined fretted fretboard.
Right.
I'm struggling a little bit with it because we're all used to playing between the frets.
Yes.
And if you don't play dead on the fret, it's not in tune.
Yeah.
And I have another fretless, a Rob Allen that I bought back in '99. I ordered it with a blank fretboard, like an upright.
Yes.
And that's easier actually for me to play for some reason. Just, I don't know why. I'm having to struggle with these fret lines.
You know, it's funny. I own a couple of basses myself, even though I'm a guitar player, and I have a fretless, and I've always loved fretless. The first fretless player that I listened to that I really got into is Tony Franklin, and he had played with Jimmy Page in The Firm, and I discovered him that way. And I always wanted a fretless, and the first fretless I got had lines on it, and I didn't like it.
Yeah,
I did not like it. And being a guitar player, playing fretted instruments, when you play, your fingers are always touching the fret in some way. And I would kind of rely on that, looking at the fretless. And I was like, man, this isn't good. And when I finally got a fretless with no lines on it, I was like, this is the stuff. Why am I using this lined bass?
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. If you don't play right on that fret line. And I've noticed it's changed the way that I've been playing my fretted basses too.
Really?
Yeah, I'm starting to play closer to that fret, which I think, from what I've heard, is the correct way to do it.
Is there a reason, do you know, why they put the lines on the bass? A fretless bass? Why they put the lines on? Is it just for ease?
Yeah, because some people
can't tell.
Want them. You know, can't just look at the space and tell where a particular note is.
It drives me nuts.
When I first started playing upright, I thought it was going to be a lot harder not to have frets because I was a guitar player, and it's like, and you know, I had to cheat, and everybody has to cheat a little bit. I put a little dot of white out with a G, A, B, you know, and at the octave. And about the time I realized where all the notes were, the whiteout had been worn off. So that wasn't a bad way to cheat. You kind of got to get some perspective.
Yeah.
I think in the beginning, at least.
Well, look at the violinists. I mean, and you started upright bass. So violinists, when they're young, they use a tape around so they get used to where the notes are, so that after a while they've developed their ear so they could hear where that note is. So. Yeah. So Ron, I'm just curious. When you get into bass and you're playing, are you only doing jazz?
No.
Are you doing rock? You doing country? What are you doing?
I do all of it.
Okay.
Everything. I really always have. I really love jazz, and for many years it was all I ever wanted to listen to, and it sort of took over for me, and I sort of got pigeonholed into the jazz bass category. Mm-hmm. But no, I love to play everything. I've been on a couple of folk CDs that were nominated for Grammys. I was on Bruce Peepoff's CD it's been more than a couple of years ago now, but it was nominated for Grammy in the folk category. And then Dom Flemons from the Carolina Chocolate Drops.
Okay.
I played on his first two solo records when they split up, and his first one got nominated for a Grammy. So that's folk. And then I was, playing with Chris Gargis, and we had a little trio called Bunky Moon with Troy Kahn, and it was more rock oriented and kind of prog, progressive rock, which is what I was listening to before I actually discovered jazz. like King Crimson and Yes and all that stuff. I just loved it.
That's the thing I love about those old bands like that. I got to say, it brought me to follow other styles of music. Like I listened to prog too when I was younger, or not exactly prog, but let's say just Led Zeppelin. That made me really appreciate acoustic music, and I went to listen to other styles based on that, or laugh about it. But I love Black Sabbath. It's one of my favorite bands. And I listened to, oh my goodness, now I can't remember his name. The great jazz guitar player with two fingers.
Oh, Django Reinhardt.
Thank you. Django Reinhardt, because of Tony Iommi reading an article where he was talking about how he was influenced by Django.
Because he injured himself. And I was like, listening to his old stuff where he kind of played some jazzy lines on some tunes, and I was like, let's go check this out. So it brought me to the other styles of music. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
My wife plays violin in Charlotte Symphony.
Mm-hmm.
I told her recently, we were listening to some Emerson, Lake and Palmer and watching some video clips on YouTube and stuff. I'm not ashamed to admit it, but it's true. I never heard the first recording of Pictures at an Exhibition I ever heard was theirs. It wasn't the orchestral version. It wasn't Mussorgsky's.
And you're probably not the first person. Same thing with Rodeo.
Yeah. But like you said, some of that stuff got me interested in, the group Yes used to open their show with the finale from, was it the finale from Rite of Spring, I think?
Really? Okay. I didn't even know.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. And they used to, when I saw them in the late 70s, the lights were out and this beautiful orchestral music starts, and it was the pianist, doing it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, but that made me go back and listen to Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, because they played the finale of it to open their shows. Yeah. And
as a bass player, you must love Bach with those in Baroque music with those moving bass lines.
Yeah,
huh?
I do. Yeah, for fun, I try to play the Bach cello suites.
Oh, okay.
On upright and electric, and they're really fun on electric. Charlie Hayden used to say if he would be the best bass player around today if he was. Yeah,
genius. So I wanted to find out from you, being a bass player, you're not in the limelight. Mostly bass players are relegated to being side guys. And there are a lot of famous bass players, don't get me wrong. But it seems that most bass players are relegated. They're on the side. Let's say you say Led Zeppelin, one of my favorite groups. John Paul Jones is always the side guy.
Yeah.
Jimmy Page and Robert Plant are the guys up front. Do you like being the supporting player? Is that your thing? Or would you prefer being up front more?
No, I enjoy the supportive role.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, I started doing a little bit of singing, with a couple of guys around town. Jeremy Shaw and we were doing a few duo gigs, and it's real different because it's like, wait a minute, I'm not in the background anymore. It's a different mindset, and I've gotten so used to it because back when I played guitar, I sang quite a bit.
Okay.
But as I became a bass player and settled into that role, in a way, it suits me a little better to be in a supportive role,
right? And
maybe let the guys with the bigger egos represent the band, in a better way. But you see those videos of Led Zeppelin. John Paul Jones is barely he's in the shadows back there beside the drums because that's where he liked to play.
Yeah, the other guys are up front, moving around, jumping around, putting on the show, and he's just holding it down.
He was holding it together, and to me, he was the unsung hero of that band.
Oh, God.
And I didn't even know that when I was a guitar player back, as a guitarist, I thought Jimmy Page was the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And those riffs and why did it sound so heavy? What was the heaviness about? And I realized it was the bass.
Yeah.
It was the bass that made it sound that way.
Oh my gosh.
And, he did all the string arrangements and
he's a fantastic mandolin player too.
Oh, when I saw Zeppelin in 72, they played for nearly 3 hours and they did an acoustic set in the middle.
Wow. Where
John Paul Jones played foot pedals with his feet and mandolin at the same time, Yeah,
he is an impressive musician.
Unsung hero of the band as far as I'm concerned.
I don't know all's history, but just watching him at Zeppelin, bass, mandolin, piano. I think he also did some background vocals here and there. So, I mean, I don't even know how many other instruments that guy plays. He's just super talented.
Yeah.
So, Ron, primarily, what are you doing these days? Are you doing a lot more jazz than anything else?
Not necessarily. No, I'm doing just a mix of things. I've got my new quartet. We've got a gig coming up on February 18th at Sharp 9 Gallery in Durham, which is a great little jazz room up in Durham. Mm-hmm. We had been booked on Charlotte Shouts last year, and everything got canceled.
Your new quartet, what's that called? Is that the RB4 Tech?
No, that's just the Ron Brendle quartet.
Okay, all right.
I have it's 2 guitars. I'm still kind of floating around names, but I have Troy Kahn and Scott Sawyer, those 2 guys on guitars, and John Spurrier on drums. And it's just a group I've always wanted to have. I just always wanted to have a band where I play bass and there's 2 guitars.
Yeah.
Because there's just like so many possibilities. There's so many sounds that a guitar can get. You can get acoustic guitar, you can get electric guitar with distortion, you can, with all the pedals now, it's just a huge palette of sounds to work with.
There are. It's interesting. We'll make a connection since we've been talking so much about Led Zeppelin, and then we also talked about Troy. You mentioned Troy Kahn, the Jazz is Led ensemble that you're part of.
Yeah, that's Curtis Wingfield, the drummer. That's his project. They had it together several years ago, and I think a couple of the guys who were in it are no longer in town. And he called me back. It was back before the pandemic.
Okay.
And said, I want to revive the Jazz is Led. You and Troy Kahn and Emmanuel Winter on violin. And I was like, oh God, yeah, this sounds incredible. So I'd been working on that for a while, and we started having rehearsals, and then we had the gig that you said you saw at
Middle C Jazz. You guys were spectacular.
That was our first gig, and then we've played 2 at the Neighborhood Theater since, and it's so much fun. I mean, it's challenging because we've done some arrangements of these tunes. It's very challenging for me to commit so much stuff to memory, I guess.
Yeah.
An hour and a half show to memory.
Yeah.
Without any charts to depend on or look at.
And you said the Neighborhood Theater shows, when we were talking earlier before we started recording, you said you learned another new 8 tunes. You guys did new arrangements just for that.
We did. Our last one was January 7th. We brought 8 new tunes in from the first show we played there in July. We don't get together every week or anything. We should, and I think we all like to.
Just timing.
There's a timing and everybody's schedule, and it's a fun group. I love it. I'm looking forward to maybe doing some festivals and some other things, because it can lean towards the jazz side. It can lean towards the jam band sort of side. Yeah. It's a rock thing. It's a funk thing. It's got everything. Curtis is getting ready to release a CD. Mm-hmm. No, it's a great project. I'm just really, really happy that he called me to do it.
Hey, you brought a track with you from the Jazz is Led recording, Ramble On, Led Zeppelin's Ramble On.
Yeah.
Can we take a listen to that?
Sure.
All right, let's check it out. this is a fantastic track, not only because it's Led Zeppelin, but just the way you guys do your version of it. So where did you guys record the Jazz Is Led album?
We did it at Old House Studios.
With Chris Gargis.
Chris Gargis, yeah.
So did you guys do individual tracks, or did you guys all play together at the same time like a typical jazz group would?
No, we all played together at the same time, largely in the same room. I know the way of the future, and it's already here, is remote recording from home. And
right.
I know that's the next big thing, and I don't have any problem with it. It's great. It allows people to do a lot of things, but there's something about being in a room with other musicians simultaneously creating.
Somebody had brought up, I think it was, I don't know if you watch YouTube videos much, but there's a guy on YouTube, Rick Beato.
Oh, yeah, I like Rick. I like to watch his stuff.
And Rick had said something about just playing with a click track. And he goes, when you listen to older albums, these musicians weren't playing with click tracks. They were all playing together in a room. And today, it leaned towards, here's the click track, here's the drummer, play with the click track. And then as the next guy adds their part, the next person adds that part. And it takes that human interaction out of it, which he mentioned certain songs, and he was bringing up how, like, the time changes, from this section to this section. It's not right on perfect on, 120 on the metronome every time. It's 110, 125, 150, the timing wavers, which is that human element.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I do a lot of sessions where I'm just coming in for the bass track, and it's to a click, and I don't mind that. It's easy for me. It's easy because I know that click is not going to move.
So do you do remote session work, Ron?
I do a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you just record your part at home and then send it out to the guys, or ladies?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I do some of that. I think everybody has to now.
Well, it's also another outlet for musicians. You don't have to, get in a car and drive to a studio. Send me the track and I'll lay it down for you.
I think it's fantastic. And if I'm playing in a room and I have on some headphones and I'm listening and playing along with the track, I don't know if that track's been pre-recorded or if there's musicians in another room that's playing it.
Right. So you've been working on a lot of projects, Ron. And one of the more recent projects you have is the recording A Tribute to the Bassist of Jazz.
Yes.
Can you fill me in about how that came about? And by the way, that's volume 1. So what that means you've got more coming.
Yeah. Yeah. How that came about was I wanted to put a CD out. I have my own record label called Low Note Records here in town. And I think I've got 13 or 14 releases, and they're not all mine. They're other people's as well. But I felt like it was time. I wanted to put something new out, and I wanted to pay tribute to the bass players.
Right.
Charlie Hayden and Gary Peacock. And
so all the recordings are their music? So you take music from each of the jazz bass players?
Each one of the songs on it is written by a famous bass player, a jazz bass player.
Okay.
Because I noticed, these guys are writing some really good music, and I've noticed a pattern here. Like, these are all bass player songs. Dave Holland, Gary Peacock, Charlie Hayden, Paul Chambers, Mingus, Ron Carter. All these guys were, great composers as well.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, years ago, Jim Brock suggested to me a way to promote my label, Low Note Records, was to put a compilation CD out of cuts, the original cuts, like Charles Mingus from this album, Ron Carter from this album, Charlie Hayden, and put a compilation thing. And I looked into it, but it was going to be prohibitively expensive. The mechanicals and taking an original recording and re-releasing it. It was just more than But I thought, well, wait a minute. Why don't I just record the music instead of featuring the original track from whatever record? We'll just take some of these songs I like a lot and record them. And so that's basically where the concept came from.
Who are some of the local players on it besides yourself?
John Spurrier's on drums, and a great piano player from Greenville, South Carolina, Keith Davis, is on it, and Troy Kahn on guitar.
Okay.
So it's a quartet, guitar, piano, bass, and drums.
Fantastic. And you brought a track with you. It's called Pocket Full of Cherry.
Yeah, that's written by Charlie Hayden.
Okay.
My mentor. And I got to study with him in 1985.
Awesome. Can we take a listen to this track?
Great.
All right, and let's go. This is Pocket Full of Cherry, recorded by Ron Brendle, but it's a track by Charlie Hayden. Ron, I actually got to tell you, I like this track, but I've been listening to that whole album, the tribute, and I just love it. I love it. There's a lot of good stuff on there.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was really pleased with the way it came out, that recording.
Where did you record it? Did you record it?
That was at Old House.
With Chris again?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's my go-to studio.
It's a great place, and Chris is a wonderful guy.
Chris is a great guy, and he's got great ears. He knows how to get good sounds out of the instruments, and he knows how to mix them, and yeah.
So fill me in. This is on your recording label, Low Note Recording. And how long has Low Note been around, and what made you start a recording label?
When I released my first CD, I recorded my first CD in 91. I kind of just started the label to release my CDs.
Okay.
A lot of people do. Got the name trademarked, got it copyrighted. Because I noticed around the world there are other low note things, and I just wanted to make sure I had a trademark on the name.
Low Note being bass?
Yeah. Yeah, there's another jazz label called High Note.
Gotcha.
Which I didn't know, but I was just trying to think, well, what's a good name for it? And I thought, well, yeah, Low Note. Why not? So I just kind of came up with it on the fly. Gotten, I think, 13, 14 releases.
Are you putting other people on the label? It's just for you primarily.
Just recently, Scott Newell, great guitar player here in Charlotte, he put a CD and a couple singles he wanted to use on Low Note.
Okay.
Yeah. And
so you don't have a recording studio per se that you do your Low Note stuff at. When people come into you go to other places, but it's all under the umbrella.
It's basically just a name that they can put on there.
Yeah.
It's a label name.
Yeah.
And it's, like I said, it's trademarked and everything. So it's not like you have to make up some name and it's like, you might get a cease and desist letter from the real whatever name that is. And there's a singer in New York, Frank Kimbrough's wife, Mary Ann DeProphetess. Mm-hmm. She released a CD with some New York musicians several years ago, and she called and said, "Can I put it on Low Note?" And I said, "Sure." And so that wound up on it, and then it got picked up by Artist Share, I think, which is a big label out of New York that they don't even release CDs. It's just you have to buy the music from their website.
Okay. And so, just out of curiosity, going back in your history, how many recordings have you played on? I mean, I was trying to count from your website, and I came up with like 33 or something like that.
It's been probably safe to say maybe 150 or more.
Damn, that's impressive. That's super impressive. That is a career.
I wish. No, I love the studio. I love being in the studio and recording.
So that begs the question for me. Do you have a preference? Do you prefer the studio? Do you prefer the spontaneity of performing live? What's your preference? Or do you have one?
Wow, that's a tough question, you know. It's like asking me if I like hamburger or pizza better, you know?
It just depends on what day, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine.
There's aspects of both I like a lot.
Yeah.
I like the creative aspect of being in the studio and creating something.
Yeah.
Creating a part and working something out.
Yeah.
Like if somebody has a track they want me to play on it, I love to see how I can serve the song, you know, what I can do on the bass to make that
right
song something they want. I like that. I did some tracks for Matthew Alexander's CD recently where it was just me, you know, and we came in and sat in the control room, and it was real relaxed, and I love that way of creating, you know. It's like, well, let me try this instead of this, and let's do this, and you can do that in the studio, and you're playing live. You don't quite have that, but so there are aspects to both that I like, and maybe if I have a preference, maybe playing live.
Do you, when you're doing your own stuff, your own music, are you mapping it out at home and doing like a rough sketch of it on recording before you go into, like, let's say an old house? Is that your preference?
Sort of. Like I don't do a whole, you know, I'm kind of primitive right now. I just have GarageBand, you know. But I don't really do a whole thing on GarageBand. Maybe I should start doing that. But I'll just write something on my bass or on the piano, or maybe not so much anymore, but on the guitar. I'll come up with an idea, and I'll just record that on, you know, my iPhone or something like that.
Yeah.
And I've written a couple of tunes with just my loop station.
Okay.
My Boss loop station. Like I wrote a tune called Sleep Talk that I just put this bass part down, and I kept the loop, and I played it back, and the melody came really quickly, and I made a loop of that, added that in, and then I came up with a bridge and looped that in. And it's like that's a good tool for me, the Boss loop station.
So when you hand it to other musicians that are recording, do you have the whole song written out then? As a typical jazz, you know, you got the head written out and you got the chord changes written out, and you just hand it to the guys and go, here's a tune?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or make a recording on the loop station where I play like the bass and the melody and have some kind of sample drum part. But mostly, I give them a chart. That's the easiest for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's we're going to start closing things out a little bit, but I want to touch on the group we talked about earlier. It's your latest thing, the RB4 Tech, which is the freeform jazz. Can you tell us about that?
That came about. I was supposed to do a thing at the neighborhood theater for the Jazz Arts Queen City Streams. It was a little bit of a misunderstanding, and I didn't realize until a few days before the session that they wanted my quartet. I thought they just wanted me to come and play bass for someone else. And so I had about 3 days to. Well, my quartet wasn't available. Troy Kahn and Scott Sawyer, the two guitar players, they couldn't do it. I didn't really want to get other musicians and try to hurry up and rehearse my original music and do it that way.
Right.
And so the idea just came to me. It was like, I want to get a trumpet player and saxophone player, somebody who's versed in this way of playing, and do an hour of improvised music. Because that's really an art form.
Oh yeah.
When you say jazz, you've got a spectrum of music that's like a mile wide, and within that spectrum, there's all these little sub-spectrums. You know, traditional New Orleans jazz, fusion, bebop, cool, and free jazz was one of those. I think maybe most misunderstood parts of jazz,
right?
The free jazz thing. And it's all about using your ears and listening to your other players.
So you're not even starting with a preconceived melody of anything. It's the person makes up the melody on the spot, and everybody else has to start to follow where the changes are going to be.
Yeah, and follow and contribute at the same time.
And how long does the jam on a particular track, a particular tune last that you guys are doing? Or I should say, how long does an improvisation last?
I don't like them to be too far drawn out. As a matter of fact, I really like for the improvisational stuff I do, I like for it to sound like it was written.
Right.
You know, I don't want it to sound like it was improvised. I want it to be cohesive and have something in it that doesn't sound like, well, what are we going to do now? What are you going to play now? You know, and that's where the real art form comes in. It's almost been compared to like really early jazz.
Right.
To like really super early New Orleans jazz before.
Well, improvisation just in itself is
yeah.
it's easy to do a short little improv, but to draw it out with other musicians at the same time is not exactly the simplest thing, and to fill an hour doing it.
Yeah, and the saxophone player and the trumpet player, they'd never met.
Oh wow!
And then the drummer, they'd never met, and we didn't rehearse, we didn't do anything. And I said, when I called him, I said, "This is what I'm confronted with. Do you want to be part of it?" And they were
like, "Yeah, let's do it."
The saxophone player was from Winston. His name is Reagan Mitchell. He moved down here from New York a few years ago. I got to play with him on a gig with Matt Postal a couple of years ago, and I thought, man, I want to do some more with this guy. And the trumpet player was Ariel Maheo. Mm-hmm. He's a young guy who came up playing with the Jazz Arts Initiative again through their educational program. So I called him and I said, you know, this is what we're going to do. I want some guys that know how to do this. And he was like, he said, I would love to do it. I've been listening to some late Miles Davis and all that stuff. And he said, I'd love to try it. I got a pedal too. I can play my trumpet through. So that's how it went.
So who are all the players in the RB4 Tech?
That's
besides yourself,
Reagan Mitchell, Ariel Mahia, John Spurrier on drums. And that was, like I said, that was kind of a last-minute thing.
Yeah.
The quartet that I'm really focused on right now is just the one with the two guitars, bass, and drums.
Okay.
And we're doing... and
you haven't gotten a title for that group yet?
Just calling it Ron Brendle Quartet for right now, but
okay.
I'm playing more electric bass on that.
Okay.
And it's more of an electric sounding... I hate the word to use the word fusion. It brings some bad connotations, but I'll call it organic fusion.
I mean, the Miles Davis Quartet was the Miles Davis Quartet, no matter who he played with. You know?
And fusion just means several styles fused. It's like rock and jazz fused, and some of it got kind of bombastic towards the end of its run.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Ron, as we close things out, can you fill us in? How do we get in touch with you? What do we need to do if we want to hire the Ron Brendle Quartet?
My website is ronbrendle.com. I have a Facebook page, Ron Brendle. I'm on Facebook.
Email?
Email's ron@ronbrendle.com. Ron@ronbrendle.com. It's a website address.
Awesome. Well, Ron, thanks for coming on today. Really appreciate having you, man.
I really appreciate you asking me. I've been looking forward to it, and it's been a lot of fun getting to talk.
Thanks. As I said to you earlier, we touched base a long time ago, several months ago, and I wanted to get you on, but doing a monthly podcast, I don't get a chance to get everybody on, as soon as I talk to them. So
sure. But
it's been awesome having you, man. Finding out all about all the stuff that you do.
Well, it's been great to be on, and nice to meet you too.
Thanks, man. Have a great day.
You too.
And that will bring episode 53 of the Queen City Music Podcast to a close. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we'll go back and check out past episodes that you may have missed. You can find the QCMP on all your favorite streaming platforms. As always, if you have an idea for an episode or would like to be a guest on the QCMP, reach out to me at qcmusicpodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out our local partners, Records on the Wall at rexonthewall.com, Reporting from 20XX at reportingfrom20xx.wordpress.com, and Queen City Live at Instagram.com/Queen City Live Music. Until next month, be well and stay safe.